Toxicity in video games. Everyone has experienced it at some point. Mobas, battle royales, fighting games, and Call of Duty lobbies
What do you want to say, you fucking
are the most well-known genres where such behavior is more prevalent. From emote spamming and teabagging to straight-up textual and verbal insults, harassment, and threats, there will always be people that, in one way or another, will find a way to ruin your day.
This is what we call being lockered.
However, as simply it is for us to describe it, toxicity is not as black and white as we might think. The human brain is a very, very complex organ, and while it's easy to categorize these sort of behaviors as simple douchebaggery, there's a lot behind the scenes that sometimes not even the toxic player in question realizes. For a start, not all douchiness is the same. Despite all of them making us feel bad and angry for the rest of the day, the motives and actions that lead to toxicity varies based on a multitude of factors. Throughout the years, I was subjected to a lot of this kind of behavior, and from those experiences, as well as being a former Bronze League of Legends connoisseur, I found out that there are three major kinds of toxicity that everyone eventually is exposed to: reactionary, malicious, and communal toxicity. Reactionary toxicity usually comes as a consequence of anger, frustration, or disappointment of the individual. Some people, once they experience those feelings while playing video games, that usually results in aggressive behavior, commonly towards other people. They don't necessarily want to be toxic, their undesirable actions are from a place of negative emotion, hence the word reactionary, and this is extremely common in competitive games, especially team-based competitive games. With the presence, and more often than not, reliance of other players, when something goes wrong, the urge to vent our frustration towards anything but ourselves skyrockets, and nothing is easier to blame for our own failures than other people. Now, of course, sometimes it's actually their fault, but being hostile towards others, even if you're in the right, won't solve anything. In fact, it might even make things worse, since now you're the one being their source of frustration, which can lead to even more toxicity, and now you know why League of Legends is a cesspool. But why are people like this exactly? Couldn't they just keep themselves calm throughout the match, or at least not say anything? Well, yes, my hypothetical smart viewer, but unfortunately every person has their own level of tolerance to negative emotions. People react differently to different things, and gamers in specific are subject to another unique phenomenon. Humans are good at suppressing emotions, and some activities, like video games, help that significantly. Players that play for unhealthy periods of time become something named alexithymic. Alexithymia is the inability to recognize or describe internal emotions, and with the addition of constant influence of emotion-suppressing activities like video games, these people become unaware of their own feelings. But the thing is, the feelings don't go away. They are still there, they just can't identify them. So over time, this constant pressure and suppression piles up and eventually starts to sporadically come out of the surface, most commonly in times of frustration or anger. At that point, despite games usually helping those people shut their emotions off, whenever something goes awry while playing, those negative emotions become the catalyst of their burst of rage that, at the first glance, seems unjustifiable. But sadly, if this wasn't bad enough, there's a worse form of toxicity. Malicious toxicity are behaviors or activities that people perform which are focused on negatively affecting others. These are people that enjoy making other players have a bad experience during their playthrough, being either trolling, deception, harassment, or bullying. These are the people that shoot on sight in Rust, non-stop teabag in Halo, or insult people for no reason in chat in MMOs. Unfortunately, there's not much depth behind their attitudes. These are simply people with bad morals or badly influenced. Not much that we can do about it. They can't be reasoned with. You can't count them down because they are not angry. Whatever they are doing, they are having fun at expense of yours. This is what people usually refer to when they are talking about this topic in the gaming industry. since it's the most severe and sometimes serious form of toxicity. This happens all over the internet, but in video games, these people have a much larger influence and power due to the interactive capabilities that games offer. And speaking of internet, there's the third major form of toxic behavior that it's much more subtle than the others. Communal toxicity is a set of behaviors or beliefs that the community of a media adopts over an extensive period of time, which is unwelcoming or uncomfortable to new members, especially reinforced alongside gatekeeping. In gaming, this involves in expecting certain behaviors while playing, enforcing creativity limitation in-game, or discrimination of people depending on their in-game status, like character choices, character appearance, amount of time playing, and other player-specific stats. The most well-known form of communal toxicity is in a very niche genre called Souls games. The phrase "get good" has been heard thousands of times throughout the internet, eventually hitting the mainstream media as the popular meme that most of us know. However, despite this saying have started as a mere joke, a significant portion of that community has a derogatory term against other members. From people that purposefully misjudges the genre to innocent players that only express their struggles with the games, "get good" is used by those individuals everywhere, all the time. In consequence, it creates an hostile environment towards newcomers and less skillful players, as well as forming a detrimental reputation around the genre's community as a whole. This happens across many genres and communities, and its severity or prevalence varies drastically, but by far the worst offender of them all is the survival genre. Survival games are notorious for being unforgivably and insanely toxic, regardless if you're either new or a veteran. In-game, you will be killed on sight, all your possessions will be robbed or simply destroyed, you will be stalked, harassed, bullied, for the most insignificant of reasons, if there's a reason to begin with, and, in some cases, you will be physically restrained, imprisoned and tortured one way or another. Outside of the game, discussions in forums will be met with frequent hostility. Asking for game advice will receive unhelpful comments or mere jokes, and disagreements will be answered with insults or verbal abuse of some kind. Throughout the many years that the genre exists, the consensus that this genre is heavily unpleasant has gone stronger the more games are released and the more popular they become. But what makes these specific surf games form such a spiteful atmosphere around their communities? Do they promote such behavior, or is it a culmination of many small other factors? The answer is both. Many survival games require ludicrous amounts of time and investment to achieve most of their milestones. However, since the majority of the titles are PvP-centric, and most don't even have other gameplay elements outside of player versus player content, the vast majority of the time players will spend playing these games will be in resource gathering or fighting other players. With the materials being limited to an extent in most cases, players are incentivized to enter in conflict with each other for either territory or resources. Adding the huge investment players put in these games, along with the pressure of keeping their belongings, tension between players rapidly escalates to indiscriminatory hostility, which eventually evolves into permanent toxicity. But survival games wouldn't have such a bad reputation if this wasn't the only reason behind it. The developers also have a huge influence on their communities, for better or for worse. And unfortunately, more often than not, devs create mechanics or features that directly and actively promote malicious and harmful behavior. A good and extreme example of that is in Ark Survival Evolved. The game has a stat called torpidity. Some attacks and consumables inflict torpor. Once the torpidity meter reaches a certain threshold, the player character falls asleep. Once asleep, the torpidity levels decrease over time until it reaches 0, and the player wakes up once again. Simple enough. However, and this is a big one, while you're asleep, your personal inventory is publicly opened, meaning that everyone has access to it, and not only they can remove items, they can also add items. In Ark, for those who don't know, Most animals can be tamed through several methods, be knockout the most common. This method involves increasing the animal's torpor until it falls asleep, put their preferred food in their inventory and wait until it's fully tamed. But, just like humans, the animal's torpidity slowly decreases over time. One way to prevent that is by putting torpor-inducing consumables inside the animal's body and force-feed them said items to increase their torpor. And yes, just like animals, you can also do the same to humans, which basically means that, with enough patience, you can knock a player out, put it somewhere, continuously feeding them narcotics and keep them asleep permanently, completely preventing them from playing the game on that server. Outside of that, Ark also has human cages, handcuffs, clubs, electric pods that tases you and immediately puts you to sleep, whips that force you to wake up, among other items. Most of these have no other purpose but to enslave or torture other players. These tools were made for harassment. This has been happening for so long and on so many titles that most, if not all, survival game communities adopted a state of expectation and even acceptance of toxicity, embracing it as a core part of the gameplay experience and something that needs to be ignored or appreciated for an individual to be considered an hardcore player. People that share this mentality often mention toxicity with pride of either overcome it or participate in it, further spreading this extremely harmful concept. The reality is, no, we shouldn't accept this. Competition is part of the genre and everyone that enjoys these games enjoy that concept. The issue is when it goes way beyond mere competition. Any harmful behavior shouldn't be ignored, let alone directly encouraged by the game's mechanics that we play. There is no solution for this. It's a game's problem, it's a people's problem, it's a developer's problem. If you solve one aspect, the others will keep the environment a wasteland of toxic waste. Once this perspective settles in, it's extremely hard to reverse it. The only thing that we can do as individuals is to do our part and swim against the current. It may be easy to torture a bunch of pixels on a screen, but behind that character there's a person that wants to have fun just like all of us. Let's be an example and enjoy these games without hostility, even if everything around you wants you to. At least, this is the minimum we can do. Thank you for watching. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you want to join the ranks, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server for memes and paleo nerd stuff, and I hope to see you all next week.